Now we're going to turn to Dolly Parton.
And we're going to look back on a wonderful, wonderful love story. Dolly Parton's husband, Carl Dean, who supported the country music star in life, love, and her career, passing away at 82. Overnight, Dolly Parton announcing the death of her husband of nearly 60 years, Carl Dean.
Have you ever heard of love at first sight? One glance strong enough to bind two people together for nearly 60 years? A marriage between a world-renowned woman and a man who always remained quietly in the background? But now, it has become a story filled with sorrow. Carl Dean, the silent pillar behind Dolly Parton, passed away on March 3, 2025, in Nashville, Tennessee, at the age of 82. This news comes as a shock to Dolly's admirers because Carl Dean was a quiet legend, a man who spent his life standing behind his wife, watching her shine on stage, yet never once seeking the spotlight for himself. Dolly Parton, in immeasurable grief, officially confirmed her husband's passing with an emotional message on Instagram. "Carl and I shared so many wonderful years together. No words can truly capture the love we had for each other over the past 60 years. Thank you for your prayers and understanding." She requested privacy for her family during this difficult time, stating that the funeral would be held within the immediate family. However, one detail left the public wondering: the cause of Carl Dean's death was not disclosed. His name may be unfamiliar to the media, but for those who love Dolly Parton, he was an inseparable part of her life. A man who once made the world ask, "Does Carl Dean even exist?" But now, it is his passing that has truly left the world in shock. A wave of sorrow quickly spread. Billy Ray Cyrus, a longtime friend of Dolly, expressed his condolences. "Sending you all my love at Dolly Parton." Tish Cyrus, Billy Ray's ex-wife, also shared her grief. "Love you, Dolly." Linda Thompson, mother of Brody Jenner, wrote heartfelt words. "You gave him so many years of love and joy. You are a gift to the world, and I believe Carl was a gift to you." But perhaps the most touching message came from Dolly's sister, Stella Parton, who spoke on behalf of the family, thanking the public. "On behalf of my sister, our family, and Carl's family, we deeply appreciate your prayers at this time. Carl Dean is gone, leaving behind an unfillable void in Dolly Parton's life. But their love was more than just a marriage that lasted nearly 6 decades. It was a story of choices, of a man willing to stand in the background, of a love that never sought attention, yet endured through time. To truly grasp the depth of this loss, we must return to the moment it all began, the day Carl Dean unexpectedly walked into Dolly Parton's life. In 1964, Nashville was not as vibrant as it is today. For Dolly Parton, it was the city of dreams, where she had just arrived, hoping to become a country music star. At 18, she had no fame, no money, only a dream and a few worn-out clothes. That day, she walked into the wishy-washy laundromat, unaware that her life was about to change forever. Not far away, a 20-year-old man was driving his white pickup truck down the street. Carl Dean was not one for crowds. Born and raised in Nashville, he had little interest in the entertainment world growing around him. A simple working man, he ran an asphalt paving business and lived an ordinary life. But in that very moment, when he saw a petite blonde girl, dressed modestly, fumbling with a load of laundry, his entire world shifted. Years later, in a rare interview, Carl Dean reflected on that fateful moment. "The first thought that crossed my mind was, I'm going to marry that girl. The second thought was, my God, she's beautiful. And that was the day my life truly began." Without a second of hesitation, Carl stopped his truck and called out to get her attention. In the midst of the bustling street, his voice was drowned out by the sounds of engines and chattering passers-by. But Dolly, always open and friendly by nature, waved back. Carl stepped out of his truck, walked closer, and struck up a conversation. Dolly wasn't naive. She knew that a young girl alone in a new city shouldn't trust a stranger at first glance. But Carl was different. He wasn't overly polished, didn't use sweet talk, and didn't try to be charming. He was simple, sincere, and there was something in his eyes that made it impossible for Dolly to walk away. She didn't agree to go out with him right away. She was cautious but not closed off. Instead of rejecting him outright, Dolly said, "I can't go anywhere with you right now, but if you really want to see me again, come to my aunt's house tomorrow. I'll be babysitting my nephew and I'll be there." The next morning, Carl showed up on time. No flowers, no gifts, no flattering words. He simply arrived, sat on the porch with Dolly, and talked for hours. They spoke about family, childhood, and the small things that shaped who they were. Then the next day, he came again. And the next. For 7 days straight, Carl went to Dolly's aunt's house, not as a man trying to impress a girl, but as someone who genuinely wanted to know her. He listened as she talked about growing up in Tennessee, about her dream of becoming a singer, about the struggles of being a young girl trying to make it in a tough industry. Dolly told her stories, and Carl sat quietly, absorbing every word. And somehow, in those quiet moments, an invisible bond began to form between them. On the 8th day, Dolly's aunt had a day off and didn't need her to babysit. For the first time, Dolly had a free day, and she agreed to go out with Carl. He didn't take her to a fancy restaurant or a romantic date spot. Instead, he drove straight to his parents' house. Carl didn't need time to figure out his feelings. He already knew that Dolly was the woman he wanted to spend his life with. As she stepped into Carl's home, Dolly was taken aback. She had expected distance, hesitation from his family, but instead, his mother welcomed her with open arms. She smiled and said, "My son told me from the very first day that he was going to marry you. And I believe he was right." Dolly didn't know how to react. Just a week ago, she had been a stranger washing clothes in a laundromat. Now she was standing in the home of a man she had just met. And yet, strangely, she didn't feel scared or uncertain. Everything had happened so fast, but it was so genuine that it laid the foundation for a lifetime together. A few years later, they would say, "I do," in a secret wedding, hidden away from the public eye. But before they reached that day, before Carl Dean became the man behind the legend of Dolly Parton, he had done something no one else could. He made a young girl with big dreams believe in something just as important: true love. A secret wedding, when love stood before fame. As the love between Dolly Parton and Carl Dean grew deeper, nothing could separate them, except for one thing: Dolly's record company. Just as her singing career was beginning to take off, her managers and music executives warned her that marriage could ruin her image. A young, single, and attractive female singer always had an advantage in the entertainment industry. They urged her to wait at least a year before getting married. But Dolly was not someone easily swayed. To her, love mattered more than commercial strategy. And Carl Dean, the man who had patiently sat on a porch with her for a week, never asking for anything, was someone she did not want to wait another day to be with. On May 30th, 1966, at just 20 years old, Dolly and Carl secretly left Tennessee, driving over 200 kilometers to Ringgold, Georgia, to avoid media attention and the interference of her record company. They chose to have the simplest ceremony possible. No extravagant wedding dress, no guests, no lavish celebration, just pure and genuine love. The ceremony took place in a small church, attended by only 4 people. Dolly Parton's mother, who quietly supported her daughter, even though she knew Dolly was going against the wishes of her record company. Reverend Don Duval and his wife, complete strangers to Dolly and Carl before that day. Yet they became witnesses to one of the most enduring marriages in entertainment history. Dolly didn't have time to find an elaborate wedding dress, but that didn't matter. Her mother lovingly sewed a simple white gown, just enough to make her look beautiful and elegant on her special day. She carried a small Bible, symbolizing the faith that both she and Carl shared. They had no professional photographer. There were no staged pictures of the bride walking down the aisle or exchanging vows. Only a single photograph was taken, right on the church steps, capturing the moment they officially became husband and wife. After their wedding, Carl Dean never sought to become the husband of a star. He continued running his asphalt paving business, allowing Dolly the freedom to chase the dreams she had nurtured since childhood. While many men might have felt jealous of their wife's fame, Carl Dean always supported Dolly without ever interfering in her career. He refused to accompany her to music events, never walked a red carpet, and never gave interviews. Silently and steadfastly, he chose to be the solid foundation behind her success, rather than the center of attention. Carl Dean, the mysterious man behind Dolly Parton. Hollywood follows an unspoken rule. Celebrities should be with equally famous partners. Stars often appear on red carpets hand in hand with their spouses, basking in the spotlight together. But Carl Dean was entirely different. He never stepped into that world, never competed for attention with his wife, and in fact, considered fame a nightmare he wanted to avoid at all costs. Here's a true story. In 1966, Dolly Parton received her first ever BMI Songwriting Award. For a young artist, this was a monumental milestone, a night to be shared with loved ones. And while Carl Dean had always disliked crowds, he reluctantly put on a tuxedo and accompanied his wife to the ceremony. But the moment he stepped into the glamorous venue, surrounded by expensive suits and blinding stage lights, Carl felt like he had entered an entirely foreign world. He stood there quietly, watching his wife take the stage, her eyes sparkling with joy as she accepted the first major award of her career. The event dragged on. Carl grew restless, but he said nothing. No complaints, no sighs, nothing to dampen Dolly's happiness. It wasn't until they reached the parking lot, as he hastily loosened his tie, that he finally looked at Dolly and said something she would never forget. "I want you to have everything you've ever dreamed of, but please don't ever make me go to one of those things again." It wasn't a demand, nor was it an ultimatum, just an honest statement from a man who knew exactly who he was, and Dolly Parton respected that. From that moment on, Carl Dean disappeared entirely from the public eye. Yet, he remained a constant presence in Dolly's life in his own special way. There were no more red carpet photos, no joint interviews, no hand-in-hand moments for the cameras, and so many people believed Carl Dean didn't exist. Rumors spread that Dolly Parton had fabricated a husband to maintain her image, that Carl Dean was nothing more than a fictional character designed to keep the public from prying into her personal life. There were no pictures, no videos, no public appearances to prove he was real, only Dolly's word. But she was never offended by the speculation. On the contrary, she laughed about it. "People say Carl Dean doesn't exist, that I made him up just to keep everyone away from me." At one point, Dolly even joked that she considered taking a photo with Carl for a magazine cover, just to prove he wasn't some hideous monster covered in warts. But Carl only chuckled and refused. He didn't need validation from anyone except his wife. While so many celebrity relationships crumbled under the pressure of fame, Dolly and Carl's love remained steady for over half a century. Because he never got caught up in her world, and she never forced him into the spotlight. Does Carl Dean really exist? A mystery that has lasted over half a century. The entertainment world follows a simple rule. If someone is too mysterious, the public will create stories to fill in the gaps. And Carl Dean is one of the most enigmatic figures Hollywood has ever known. For decades, whenever Carl Dean was mentioned, Dolly Parton's fans always asked the same questions. Does this man really exist? Why has no one ever seen him in public? Is Dolly hiding some kind of secret? At first, the rumors were just casual speculation, but over time they turned into legend. Some believed Carl had passed away long ago and that Dolly was only pretending he was still alive to maintain her image. Others went even further, suggesting that he was merely a fictional character she had created to protect her privacy. Dolly was well aware of the public's curiosity, but instead of being offended, she turned the rumors into a joke. In one interview, she laughed and said, "I've heard so many people say that Carl doesn't exist. They think I made up a husband just to avoid being asked about my personal life. Maybe I should take a picture with him and put it on a magazine cover so people don't think I'm married to a blow-up doll." It wasn't just the media. Even those close to Dolly rarely saw Carl Dean. He never accompanied her to family gatherings, never attended friend meetups, and never showed up at any of her award ceremonies. One of the clearest examples was in 2019, when Dolly Parton was honored at the MusiCares Person of the Year event, an award celebrating artists with major contributions to the music industry. Countless family members, friends, and colleagues were in attendance, except for Carl Dean. In fact, even some people in the entertainment industry who had worked with Dolly for years had never seen him. One of her former assistants once admitted in an interview, "I worked with Dolly for years, and I can count on one hand the number of times I ever heard her mention Carl. I've never met him, and I don't think anyone in this industry has." Carl Dean, the man who inspired Jolene. Throughout her career, Dolly Parton has written thousands of songs, but Jolene remains one of her most iconic hits. With its mesmerizing melody and pleading lyrics, the song tells the story of a woman afraid of losing her man to a younger, more beautiful rival. But what many people don't know is that Jolene wasn't actually a sad story. It was an inside joke between Dolly Parton and Carl Dean. It all started at a bank in Nashville. Carl Dean, a man who usually avoided attention, suddenly developed a habit of going to the bank quite often. But not because he had a fortune to deposit or withdraw. It was because of a particular female bank teller. According to Dolly, this teller was completely smitten with Carl, a tall, quiet, and reserved man. She flirted with him every time he came in, so much so that even Dolly took notice. But instead of feeling threatened or jealous, she found the whole thing hilarious. One day, after noticing Carl was making more bank visits than usual, Dolly jokingly said to him, "You sure are spending a lot of time at the bank. I don't think we have that much money." Carl just laughed, but that was enough to spark an idea in Dolly's mind. She never saw the bank teller as a real threat. She never worried about losing Carl because she knew exactly who her husband was. But that didn't stop her from turning the situation into a song. And so, Jolene was born. Dolly didn't name the song after the bank teller. In reality, the name Jolene came from a young girl she had met at an autograph signing event. The girl had striking red hair, deep blue eyes, and a name that Dolly thought was both beautiful and strong. She promised the girl she would use her name in a song, and when the bank teller incident happened, Dolly knew it was the perfect opportunity to keep that promise. Despite the song's desperate lyrics, with its famous lines, "Jolene, Jolene, 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 I'm begging of you, please don't take my man." In reality, Dolly never had to beg anyone to stay away from Carl Dean, because nothing could ever take him away from her. When asked about the story, Dolly clarified, "Carl isn't the kind of man to mess around. If anyone should be worried in this relationship, it's me, because I'm the one who's always traveling." Carl was never one for romantic escapades. He loved Dolly from the moment they met, and over 60 years later, he never changed. No drama, no affairs, no heartbreak, just a funny moment between a couple who truly loved each other, turned into an everlasting song by Dolly Parton. Today, Jolene remains one of the most famous country songs of all time. It has been covered by hundreds of artists, from Miley Cyrus to the White Stripes, and continues to evoke images of a heartbreaking love triangle. But in reality, it's not a song about sorrow. It's a reminder that even in marriage, love can be filled with humor and unforgettable moments. And Carl Dean, the man who unknowingly inspired it, will always be an essential part of that story. From a lasting love to a heartbreaking decision, Dolly Parton and Carl Dean shared a rare kind of love in the entertainment world, a relationship that was neither flashy nor loud, yet deeply profound and enduring. They stood by each other through every storm, every rumor, and every pressure that came with fame. But there was one thing that made their love story incomplete: a life without children. Although Carl Dean was an independent man who had no interest in the glamour of show business, that didn't mean they never thought about having children. They had once dreamed of a small family, and even discussed the name Carla if they ever had a daughter, a name that perfectly combined both of theirs. But as Dolly's career skyrocketed, she knew that if they had a child, everything would change forever. She spent most of her time touring, recording, and building her music empire. Carl Dean, in contrast to his wife, cherished peace and privacy. They both realized that having children would transform their lives in ways they weren't sure they were ready for. Yet, this wasn't the only reason they decided not to have children. While the world saw Dolly Parton as a radiant, joyful, and energetic performer, few knew about the physical and emotional pain she endured. Dolly suffered from endometriosis, a painful gynecological condition that affects fertility. For years, she endured excruciating pain while still smiling for her audience. By 1984, as her condition worsened, Dolly was forced to undergo a hysterectomy, the removal of her uterus. It was not just a physical loss, but an emotional devastation for a woman who had once dreamed of motherhood. After the surgery, Dolly fell into a deep depression, to the point where she even contemplated ending her life. A woman who had brought joy to millions found herself facing the darkest moments of her own existence. But in that pain, she found a new purpose. Dolly Parton may never have had biological children, but that didn't mean she couldn't be a mother in a different way. Instead of pouring her love into just one child, she shared it with millions of children around the world. And that's how Imagination Library was born, an organization that provides free books to children, giving them the opportunity to access knowledge from an early age. Dolly once said, "I didn't have children of my own, but I believe God had a plan for me to love and help all the children out there." And despite not having children, something that often serves as a binding force in many marriages, Dolly and Carl remained together for a lifetime. Because for them, it was their unwavering love that was the strongest bond of all. A lasting marriage. The little things that make love eternal. Love is not built solely on grand vows, extravagant gifts, or lavish celebrations. For Dolly Parton and Carl Dean, their love was sustained by the simplest things, yet it carried a timeless strength. They had no affectionate red carpet moments, no shared private glimpses on social media, and no grand declarations of love for the public. Yet between them, love never faded. For many, romance might come from a candlelit dinner or an expensive present, but for Carl Dean, love was expressed through small yet meaningful gestures. Every spring, when the first daffodils bloomed, Carl would pick a bouquet for Dolly. And not just that. He would write her a poem, a tender act that no one would have expected from such a quiet man. He may have never been in the media spotlight, but he was always present in Dolly's heart, in ways only the two of them understood. Their marriage was never about lavish parties or luxurious vacations, but it was filled with countless simple riverside picnics. Whenever they had time together, Dolly would pack Carl's favorite foods into a picnic basket, and they would find a quiet spot by the river to enjoy their meal. For Carl, love didn't require anything extravagant. Just a good meal, a peaceful place, and Dolly by his side. That was enough. These seemingly small moments became the glue that bound them together for more than half a century. In 2016, to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary, Dolly Parton and Carl Dean decided to renew their vows. Their first wedding had been a private affair, with only Dolly's mother and the officiating minister as witnesses. But this time they wanted to share the moment with their closest family and loved ones. Dolly wore a stunning white wedding gown, and Carl, after decades of avoiding formal attire, finally put on a suit. Not for fame, not for publicity, but simply because they wanted to do this for each other. Dolly had often joked with Carl that if she could marry him all over again, she would, and then she thought, why not? After more than half a century together, their love never wavered. They never needed the world's validation, never needed a dramatic fairy tale romance. Only each other and the small things they did for one another, year after year. In the end, eternal love isn't defined by grand gestures and fleeting moments, but by the little things done with sincerity, day after day, year after year. And that is how Dolly Parton and Carl Dean loved each other. A simple love that never faded. A love beyond time, a departure that cannot separate two hearts. Carl Dean may have passed away, but the love he and Dolly Parton shared remains, not only in her heart, but also in the hearts of millions of fans. After more than 6 decades together, they redefined romance, proving that love doesn't have to be loud, doesn't have to be flaunted. It only needs understanding, respect, and sincerity. Dolly once said, "He loved me before I was a star. To him I was always his star." That wasn't just a statement. It was the clearest testament to a rare kind of love in the ever-changing world of Hollywood. Carl Dean may have left this world, but he will forever remain in Dolly Parton's heart. The man who silently loved, supported, and became her safe haven throughout her life. Carl's passing is not only a devastating loss for Dolly, but also a heartbreaking moment for those who admired their love story. In an industry where relationships often fade as quickly as they bloom, they proved that true love can last a lifetime, untouched by fame or time, and that will never change. The moment Dolly shared this sorrowful news, social media was flooded with messages of condolences from fans worldwide. "We will always love and support you, Dolly." A familiar message, yet one that carries immense comfort. Another wrote, "Carl Dean may be gone, but the love between you two will live forever." Those closest to Dolly have also sent their support, reminding her that Carl will always be present in the memories they shared, in every song, in every story she tells about him. Now is the time for all of us to remember a man who silently loved Dolly Parton for more than 60 years. And it is also a moment to send our prayers to Dolly, a strong woman who is undoubtedly facing the deepest sorrow of her life. If you feel the weight of this loss, share your thoughts in the comments below and send your words of encouragement to Dolly and her family. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel to continue exploring the meaningful stories of cultural legends. Let's keep the eternal love of Dolly Parton and Carl Dean alive through time. See you in our next videos.